Let's take an in-depth look at Nik Analog Efex. It's the app that allows you to emulate old analog cameras, those cameras that took film. The cool thing about old analog cameras is they had defects. The lenses weren't so good. Maybe you had like a little cheap, inexpensive camera that didn't snap together, so the film got light leaks on it. You had some distortion. There were toy cameras that we used to have back in the day. They had multiple lenses. Sometimes the bokeh was off. Things were out of focus, and Analog Efex allows you to emulate all of that. It's just a ton of fun. So what we're going to do, we're going to go into our workshop images folder and then open Nik Analog Efex, and then there's an image called San Telmo, and I'm going to open that in Photoshop. So I'm just going to drag that over to Photoshop. We're just using Photoshop because it's the app that most photo editors use for editing images, because you can combine different Nik apps and do all kinds of things, but you can absolutely do all of this stuff as a standalone app as well. So if you want, you can just open this TIFF right into Analog Efex directly. It's up to you. Okay, so we have our man walking in San Telmo. This was in Buenos Aires. You'll notice that my Nik 6 palette isn't showing up here, and so all you have to do, if that's happening to you, going to File, Automate, and then hit the Nik Collection palette, and it's going to show right up. Okay, now that we have this, let's jump over into Nik 6 Analog Efex. This is going to open our guy who's walking in San Telmo. Now the thing that you'll notice on the left-hand side, we have two main categories. We have the camera kit, and then we have cameras. We are going to start with cameras because we can sort of work backwards to explain what the camera kit is, because the camera kit makes up a camera. So let's go in here and take a look at these cameras. So we have all the cameras are categorized. If you just click on this all button here, or if you want to just look at a certain type of camera, like maybe toy cameras or vintage cameras, you can click, and then those will show up underneath here with a little preview of what you're going to get. I'm just going to click on toy camera. You'll see that now we have some warped images here. It looks pretty wonky. I can go in, I'll do a multi-lens camera, just click on that, and whammo, we get some, wow, interesting stuff that looks like a book cover. I can go into a toy camera here. Let's do, I don't know, toy camera 7. You can see we've got some wackiness here. See if we have, I don't know, a vintage camera of some sort. Let's do vintage camera 1. We can see that we're gonna get, ooh, a frame here, and this has got some light leaks. When we click on a camera, the software is going to emulate an actual camera from the past. So a camera might have been built with defects, so light leaks come in or a bad lens, and so a camera is going to add those things, light leaks and some warped lenses. So if we look here at this vintage camera, I just chose that at random, on the right-hand side we can see that this camera includes some basic adjustments. It includes an artificial bokeh, it includes some light leaks, it includes a lens vignette and a film type. And depending on the type of camera that you choose, so let's choose one from motion, click, you can see that we're getting different things over here. Zoom and rotate blur and vignette and a film type. If I click on, I don't know, something that's in vogue, how about another black and white? So it's going to apply different things. It's going to have a frame here. It's going to have, it looks like it has a finishing, some blue on that. It's got a cool frame. So whatever you click here, it's going to apply a different set of settings and filters on the right-hand side. And then you can always go and adjust those on the right-hand side. So what are these settings? What is bokeh? What are light leaks? What is all this stuff? Well, what we can do is I'm going to go through here. I'm going to click these little X's to get rid of all these filters that have been added to my image, so we have sort of a clean palette here. So nothing has been applied here. Make sure that my frames, click. Okay, I have to have at least one thing applied, so I'm just going to uncheck that. So here's our man walking in San Telmo. If we go to the top, we have a camera kit. So the camera kit is what makes up a camera. So we can choose basic adjustments, which almost every camera has. Those are things like brightness and contrast and saturation and how much detail you have. Lens distortion, you can add. This is one of those apps where you're not fixing distortion, you're adding it. You're not fixing light problems, you're adding them. You're not fixing dust and noise, you're adding it to make it look like an old camera. It's really cool. So we have lens distortion, we have bokeh to make things look like they have a shallow depth of field. We have rotation and zoom blurs, motion blurs, double exposures, light leaks, scratches, photo plates. So back in the day when you did developing in a darkroom, sometimes you had these plates that would stick to the film and it would get textures on the actual chemicals. So we can add that stuff, lens vignettes. We can emulate old classic film types, multi-lens cameras. We can add frames, and then we can do basic levels and curves adjustments. So we can mix and match these in any way, shape, form, or fashion that we want. And if you want to see how these are mixed and matched, you can just go through and choose any of these things, click on it, and just look on the right-hand side and see how this film camera was created. So what we're going to do is, I highly encourage you to take this image of this guy walking in San Telmo and just explore these cameras. Click through there, see what you get. You're going to start to learn which camera effects you like and which ones you don't like. It's a great image because almost everything looks interesting with this image. So to start with, let's go and I'm going to cancel out this image here that we've been working on. I'm not going to save that. I'm going to go back to my workshop images folder, and here is an image called Emily Screen. So I want you to open that because we're going to start building out our own camera kit and learn exactly how to use some of these different sliders. So again, I'm in Photoshop. You can open this image directly into Analog Efex if you want to, but in Photoshop, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to hit my Analog Efex button, and this is going to open this image, and so we can start working on it and to make this something that we can call our own. So we're not going to use any of these preset cameras. Instead, we're going to build out our own camera kit. So by default, basic adjustments are always going to show up here. You always have to have at least one filter. So basic adjustments is the filter that we will start with. And so what we're going to do to begin with, I want to add bokeh. So I'm just going to click on this little plus, and then bokeh is going to show up here on the right-hand side. And so what that's doing is it is giving us a center point of what's in focus, and then from this line to this line, how that focus falls out of focus. And so I can change the shape of this. So I'm going to change this so it shows up just on her face. I'm going to give this a nice subtle fallout. And then the other thing I want to do is I don't want to boost these highlights. It's making the end of this screen look a little bit wonky. So what I'll do is I'm going to take that down to 0. So to the left and to the right, you can see how that changes things. So now our screen here, in fact, I'm going to change this by clicking on this line, making it a little bit to the little diagonal like that. You can see that that screen sort of falls out of focus. It makes it more pleasing. And so what I'll do is I'm going to give this a little bit more of that. That looks pretty good. I like that. Okay, so the other thing that we can do, as soon as I added this bokeh here, so that's sort of a soft out of focus area, the screen doesn't look as punchy as I would like it to look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to the detail extractor, and I'm going to increase that so we get more details. So up to maybe 50–60%. And as soon as I do that, things look overexposed because there's so many details in this screen, and the contrast that it creates, it's making the highlights too much. And so what I can do is I can go in and I can take my brightness, and let's tame this a little bit. So let's take this down to about 30%. So it looks a little bit more like it was before. So now we can compare before and after. We can start seeing how things are falling out of focus, how we're getting some punch there, how it looks pretty cool. I think we need a little more contrast, so I'm going to add in my basic adjustments just about 10 or 15% more contrast. Again, before and after. We can go in here to 100%, and we can see how this screen looks much punchier now. Now it fades out. I really like that. Okay, so the other thing that we want to do is right here, we got this red blotchy thing. So I don't want that to show up in my image. I want this to be a black and white-ish image. So this red is driving me nuts. So all I have to do here is go in, I'm gonna grab a control point, I'm gonna place it on this red, and I'm gonna make this a much smaller control point. Really what I wanna do is just desaturate this area. So it doesn't really matter if I'm desaturating the red and the screen, because the screen doesn't really have any color. So I'm just gonna go in, take my saturation down to 0, and you can see that we have eliminated the red dot. I'm going to name this red dot, just so we know what it is. So I can fit this. So now we can look at before, after. If I go in, we can take a look at where we just corrected that. Before, you can see the red right over here. So before, after, it's gone. That looks really, really nice. Okay, now the next thing I want to do is let's add a film type. So I'm going to go here, add a film type. This allows us to emulate different film tones. So we have choices of warm, cool, subtle, black and white, neutral, or toned. So a black and white neutral might be this second one or first one. So that looks sort of silvery. I really like that. That looks really great. So for this one, I still want some color. So I'm going to go and make this a subtle film type. And then the film type I'm going to use, I think I'll get, let's see, something like this. Yeah, looks pretty good. I think that looks pretty good. Yeah, it's a sable. So once we have that, we can look at before and after. We're starting to dial this in, so you don't have to go extreme like we do with the guy in San Telmo. We can go a little bit more subtle. I really like where we're headed with this. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to go down here. One of the things I like, it's a frame. So I'm going to add a frame to this. There are all kinds of different types of frames that you can add. So it can be something that would be on a film strip that you'd see in a dark room, something that you'd see like in an old Polaroid. You can change that to a white border. So we have something that will put a white area around. I really like these. So I'm just going to choose one of these at random. Something like, yeah, that looks pretty good. Or maybe even this guy right here. I like that. That looks pretty amazing. Play with these. You never know what you're going to get. By the way, there is a button right here that says Vary. I love this button. It's sort of like the old button in Google that said Surprise Me. So inside of your filter, if you hit Vary, the Nik Analog Efex is just going to change the settings at random. And so it might change the scale, it might change the frame size, it might change just about anything. And so you just click on that and just try different things. Sometimes if you get stuck editing an image, I just like to click Vary on a filter and see what I get. And so I like this. I like this. I think this is the frame that I want. That looks pretty good. The other thing I want to do is I want to add some texture to this. So I can add some dirt and scratches to make this look like a photo that was stuck in the closet for a long time. Or I can add a photo plate. I'm going to add a photo plate because it's a little bit stronger of a texture. So a photo plate emulates that mistake that would happen in a dark room when the emulsion, the film, would get stuck to the plate that you were working on, the glass plate, and it adds all this texture. So you can have streaked photo plates. You can change these to corroded or concrete. They're just textures that are added on top of your image. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a corroded photo plate, and I think the last one here, I'm going to zoom in to 100% so I can really see what's happening. That looks pretty good. You can see all this texture that we're getting. So what we're going to click through these and see exactly which one looks great. I think this last one here is the one that I want to use. Yeah, in fact, maybe a little bit more texture. Yeah, okay. This looks pretty good. One of the things I don't like, I like how this is looking on the screen, is adding some depth to this image. I don't like that it's on her face. I don't want this texture to be on her face. So all we have to do is use a control point to remove that texture from areas that we don't want it to be. So all I'm going to do is go in here to my photo plate. I've got this control point. I'm going to click that. I'm going to drag it over here to the forehead, click on her forehead. I'm going to shrink this down a little bit so it sort of constrains where this is working. And then right here I have this texture strength. I'm just going to slide that to the left. You can see that texture is starting to fall off of her forehead. What I can do is click on this and see exactly what I've selected. So I'm going to increase the chrominance and luminance so I get a little bit more of her forehead. So now I've seen what I've done, and we can see that that is falling off. I can even expand this. And there we go. I'm removing that texture, which is pretty cool. The thing that's really awesome about control points is you can see that up in her hair here, we're still getting some texture. I'm going to increase the size of this. You can see that it's falling off of all of her face, but we're still getting some in her hair. That's okay, because I can hit Option or Alt on a PC, drag this over to copy that control point, and so all of those settings are being taken with us. So now if we go up here at 100%, you can see that we've removed that texture from her hair. If we still have some over there, we can click on this, Alt Option, put this over here. So we're just sort of adding multiple copies of these control points to say this is where we don't want any of this texture. Then of course I could group those control points if I wanted to, but for this demo, we're just going to do this very quickly. You don't really have to worry about it. Okay, so before and after, we've made a big difference to this image, and that's pretty much how you create your own custom camera. Take things from the camera kit, add them, make adjustments, and then once you have a combination that you like, the next step is to go in and save this as a preset. So I could save this as, I don't know, bokeh screen, whatever you want to name it. For this one, I'm not going to save local adjustments because I think if I applied this to a different image, it's not going to have a forehead where I needed to remove that texture. So I can just save that. So in the future, if I want to use the same effect, I just go to my custom presets, click on bokeh screen, boom, it's all done. I've created my own look that I really like, and I can always change it as we go forward. Okay, so the next thing we want to do, we've looked and seen how we can do some dramatic toy camera effects and frames and things with our San Telmo guy by just using those preset cameras. We've looked how we can create our own camera using the camera kit. We're going to do another camera kit exercise, but this time we're going to combine some effects from Nik Efex and Analog Efex to create a new version of an old portrait that I took. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to cancel this. I think we're done with the Emily screen image. I really like how that looks, but I'm going to close this without saving. I'm going to go over into my workshop images, and I have this conga image. So I'm going to bring that into Photoshop, and I have this sort of subtle image. I like this, but I think we could get some new life to this image by changing some of the color and how this is framed and some other things. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this into Nik Color Efex, and by doing this I can use a preset and we can do some really fun things. So in this preset here, I'm going to use something that we've used before. We're going to soften the skin by smoothing it. So I'm going to type in smooth, and here we have classic portrait smooth skin. So I'm going to click on that, and this is going to help Conga's skin here. We can look at 100%. I'm going to change the skin tone, so I've got to choose the skin color. So I'm going to choose on her cheek exactly what we're looking for. We can see the before and after. This is just sort of smoothing out a little bit of her forehead and a little bit of the texture on her cheeks. So I'm not really going to do anything here. Just use the preset as it is to create some smooth looking skin. Her shoulder looks a little bit smoother. And this is going to become apparent why we're doing this when we hop over into Analog Efex. I am going to make sure I convert this to a smart object. I will hit apply. And now we have an image that we can work with in Photoshop. The next thing we want to do is to take this, all the changes that we made, and hop over into Analog Efex. So I'm going to click on Nik Analog Efex. I love these vintage cameras, and so if you don't see vintage camera, make sure you click vintage camera. That's going to filter your results. And then let's choose, I think it's camera 8. Yeah, so it's got this sort of nice color overtone. So I'm going to click on that. And now we can start fine-tuning this and making it into something that we like. So the first thing I want to do is, this has some bokeh on it, so I can click on the bokeh filter over here. It's in the wrong place. So I'm going to bring this up because I want her face to definitely be in focus. And this is way too much of an out of focus area. So all I have to do is I can drag this and it changes when the blur begins. So we just want her arm to be blurring out sort of at the edge. I'm also going to change the angle of this, so that looks pretty good. The other thing we want to do is, this color is coming from this filter right here. These are called light leaks. That would be what would happen in the old days if you dropped your camera or something, or you had a cheap camera and the camera didn't fully enclose the film. Light would leak into the film, causing these streaks. And you can apply those in post-production here in Analog Efex by adding a light leaks filter. And so you can just sort of click through here and see what those would look like. I love these because you can add either a really dramatic, crisp something like this, or something that's a little more subtle like this. You also have this little square, or this little dot here, and you can move up and down where those light leaks are applied, left and right. So I like something maybe a little bit more like this. It's a little bit too much color for my taste. And so I have this strength slider. If I go all the way to the right, you can see that light leak is applied really dramatically. If I go to the left, it's very subtle. And so that's about what I want. Something really nice and subtle on this image. And then the other thing that we need is some detail. So I'm going to add some detail by going to my basic adjustments, and I'm going to increase my detail extractor to about 25–30%, something like that, to really bring out what we're seeing there. So you can see before and after. This is a totally new version of an old portrait. I really don't like this frame, but that's okay. I can always go in here and change this to something else. And so for this, I think what I'd like is, I don't know, let's just play with a couple of these. That's pretty good. It's a little too much with the edges. I want something simple, and that is perfect. Okay, so we have created exactly what we want. And so I'm going to make sure I convert this to a smart object and hit apply. And then this image is going to show up in Photoshop. And there we have our final image. And I absolutely love how this looks. And you can see that we have created a beautiful portrait by combining Nik Color Efex, Nik Analog Efex, and then changing some of the preset filters to make a look that is all our own. Now I encourage you to go and explore Nik Analog Efex. You can see it's just a ton of fun. Take that guy from San Telmo, load him in, go through all of those preset cameras, mix and match, create your own camera kit, and see what you can create. There are just endless possibilities with Nik Analog Efex, and I absolutely love it. Okay, we're done with Analog Efex. It's time for us to move on to our next app.